Jumbo, Habarigani and Nugu, Banigani Nada, Chinalangu Regime. That's Swahili. I was having fun with those guys from Uganda this morning. Did you enjoy the choir? I think that was pure East African, where they just wear their emotion on their sleeves. I mean, just get up and dance and celebrate. That's like a normal church service over there. Yeah, joy. And that video about the day in the life is very familiar to me. We do a lot of missionary work in Africa and in rural places. In the cities, it's better. You have some water and electricity. In the rural places, there's no water service. There's an outhouse out back. How many of you know what an outhouse is? I'm talking to the outhouse crowd. And and then you've got the cooking on a charcoal fire or using roots. And so every day you dig up roots for firewood, pull something off a tree. The banana trees, plantains, he called them, are produced year round. Bean crops. There's no winter. There's no freezing. And you cook the food that day, and if you do make some money at a part-time job, a lot of people have a part-time job. You come home and you pay whatever bills you have to pay. If you have to pay rent or anything, or you have a medical bill, you pay it right now. You get rid of the money. You spend the money. Because if you carry money around, somebody's going to need that money. They're going to come to you and say, my brother needs some medical operation. And you're saving that money to pay the rent, but in African culture, if they need it, you give it. If you got it, you give it. So you get rid of it, which is counterproductive, isn't it? They can't save any money. They turn the money into groceries as fast as they can, stock up. Yeah. It's a hard life. In Uganda, he mentioned Idi Amin. Do y'all remember Idi Amin? He's a bad guy. And he was the boxing champion, I think, and a popular person, a populist. Everybody liked him, and a general in the army. And he got elected vice president, and the president, whose name was Okello, suddenly died, mysterious death. And suddenly Idi Amin is the president/dictator and was in for quite some time. And in 1986, a man named Yoweri Museveni, who's actually a Muslim, but his wife Janet is a Christian, so he's not a hostile Muslim, organized an army of orphans whose parents had been killed by Idi Amin. And he armed them with guns. Can you guess where he got the guns? It's called the CIA. It's a true story.
Yeah.
We armed up the orphan army, and they defeated Idi Amin and ran him out. And Yoweri Museveni became the president in 1986. I was actually there in 1986. We're driving down the road in a missionary's Jeep. On the side of the road, it looked like they had cannonballs. You ever seen cannonballs stacked in a pyramid about 5 feet high? They weren't cannonballs. They were skulls of the people Idi Amin had killed. He threw so many people into the turbines of the dam at Victoria Falls that it ruined the turbines from producing electricity, because Idi Amin liked to throw his enemies and kill them that way. So he's gone. He died. He actually fled the country, but he died later of a syphilis to the brain. That'll kill you. But the problem now is Museveni was president that I mentioned in 1986. Guess who's the president today? Same guy. 38 years, would that be? He'll be 40 years in the office. So once you get in, you can't get them out. They don't have term limits. But Uganda has done really well. 40 years of peace. Then we had this crazy group called the Lord's Army for something, Lord's Salvation Army, something crazy. They were not Christians. They were up in the northeast part of the country in a tribal area that Museveni had come from that tribe. And he would not send the army up to take these guys out. And this is the story of the Lost Boys. Remember the Lost Boys story? That they recruited so many boys to be soldiers, and then the boys would escape often. But that finally got knocked down. So I have to admit, Uganda has had a lot of peace over these years, but it's wonderful to see what these guys, and lots of people are doing lots of kind of ministry that they're doing. And they're building, I don't know if you saw the brochure, they're building a huge school that'll seat 1,000 people. And in the capital city of Kampala. They have 8 schools, but none in the capital. Now they have a small one there, but they're building this big 4-story school to house 1,000 people. And these 1,000 kids will generally stay with a relative. And if your parents are both dead, an aunt or an uncle or grandma or somebody will take you in. This is typical Africa. They'll take you in. But what happens is that person has 3 of their own kids they got to pay the school fees for. and they got a farm. So they build a little hut for you on the farm, and they feed you and house you, but they don't pay your school fees. You just become a farmhand for the rest of your life. And your dad died, and that land went to the uncle, the brother of your dad, right? He now owns that land. Guess who he's going to give that land to when he dies? His kids. So that's the kid that's the vulnerable kid, the one who's the pure orphan. But a lot of times places, the groups we've worked with and the ones today, they let the kid be with the relatives and he feeds them and houses them. And then the ministry pays his school fees to a government school, or actually has the school and pays the clinic fees and gets them educated and gets them out of there. That's the government plan. And I'm talking about that because Eric Ebbinghaus was intended to come in the door at 10:30 and say a quick word of thanks, but he didn't show up. So he'll probably, I bet he comes at the end of 11:30.
He's giving the welcome after the first song. So.
He's giving the welcome. He's probably stuck. Well, he may pop in. We'll just call a timeout and let him talk, okay? Because he's Eric and he's cool. He also does the best imitation of Jim Walters talking than anybody. If you've never heard him do me, oh, we'll have to make him do it. He can do it. It's humiliating. No. Meanwhile, yes, sir. English is one of the national languages. In fact, Swahili is actually a trade language across 3 or 4 countries. And the national language is called Luganda, the country's name with an L in front of it. But most of the countries in the world, since the internet came out, almost anywhere you can travel, anybody who's under about 20 years old will understand a lot of English. You can speak English to them. They may not be able to talk back to you very well, that you could pronounce, you wouldn't be able to understand their pronunciations, but they've watched the television, the cable TV, the dish, satellite TV is there, they watch the same programs. Oh my gosh, some of the teenagers in Africa will tell you about Britney Spears and whoever, I don't know. She's still a teenager, I'm probably 30 years old. She's probably a grandma now, right? No, they'll tell you the names of the popular stars, and they'll tell you the teams, they'll know the basketball teams, they'll know the World Cup teams around the world, that they're incredibly informed. And a lot of these people do watch the global news broadcasts. BBC News, Australia News, CNN, Fox, all of these things are in English and they watch them all. But they just get confused because they're all telling different stories. So, and they really don't care much. Africans are wonderful about living for today. They're better than we are at that. And people and relationships matter more than things. They get by with an amazing, but they live in the dirt, in a dirt house with a dirt floor, and their clothes are clean. And I go over there and stay in a hotel and walk on the dirt roads and I'm filthy. How do they stay so clean? I don't know. It's magic. Anyway, I'm wind jamming. Anything else? Quick question. Okay, yes, sir.
I had just heard not very long ago, Tim Tebow, his organization, has listed Uganda as the #1 targeted nation in the world now.
For needing orphan help?
No,
For targeted?
for
Sex trafficking could be, yeah. There's about 20 nations that make that claim. This one of them, yeah. It's for sex trafficking, yeah. Kids being sold off. Asia's bad. Nepal's very bad. There's several of them. Tim Tebow, by the way, the football player, played for Florida and played for the Broncos briefly. And yeah, it was wonderful. And I had breakfast with Tim one morning. I did. It was just me and Tim and 2,000 other people. Just over that big hotel next to Blue Arena. But I'll tell you, I got to tell you the Tim Tebow story that I love. I knew he would tell a good football story, and he said, a lot of y'all are Bronco fans here. We all, yeah. So all y'all remember that I got into the playoffs and we beat Pittsburgh in overtime on the first play of overtime. He said, that's not my favorite play. My favorite story of the Bronco days was the week before we had to win that game to make the playoffs. We were playing the Jets. They were in town. We were favored, and we were losing. He said, we were losing. The way he said, in the fourth quarter, we are losing. He said, we're down to 2 minutes. We have the ball and no timeouts. We're marching down the field, and a strange thing, I was exhausted. He said, now remember, I'm the quarterback. We don't run around a lot. I'm never exhausted. I don't get tired of the football game. I just snap the thing and throw and so forth. For some reason, I couldn't get my breath. I started praying, God, I need to get my breath. I need a timeout. I got to have a break. Help me. Because he's a praying guy, right? He said, I get in the huddle to call the play. We're down about the 30-yard line of the Jets. It's like 3rd and something. and a naked man jumps over the rail and runs across the Jets' backfield. I remember on TV, they had to cut away from it on TV. A streaker, right? And the Jets are chasing him, the field marshals, the guards, everybody's chasing the thing. So the referees call a timeout. We go over there, he gets his oxygen mask. And the offensive coach comes running over to him and says, Tim, I used to be for the Jets. I was on the Jets staff. I know their defensive coach. And every time he gets a timeout, inside of 2 minutes, he has time to scheme up some blitz. So they're going to alter their defense, and they're going to just rush you like crazy and try to tackle you before. So here's what you do. You take the ball and run. And Tim said, we snapped the ball. I ran to the side. This blitz came over the middle. I ran 30 yards, touchdown. We win the game. And he said, I'm convinced this day, I don't know who the guy was, but God sent the naked man, he said. All right. On that note, still no Eric Ebbinghaus. Wes Wagner, oh yes ma'am, Elaine.
I had the privilege of going to Uganda about 10 years ago. I sponsored 2 children through Compassion International. And they take a whole bunch of sponsors and take them to the country to meet their children.
It was glorious. It was great, wasn't it? That's a good thing. Yeah, sponsoring kids is a great thing. Everybody should sponsor an orphan. You know, you never know. We're going to stand before God someday and be rewarded for our deeds. And Jesus took the punishment for us, for our misdeeds. But as Tony Campolo famously said, someday you're standing before God in the judgment. You look over and there's a little orphan standing next to you. That might not be a bad thing to have an orphan standing next to you. Yeah, you know who Tony Campolo is? Anyway. Okay, Wes Wagner. Oh, I can see another. Oh, Joanne's not her sister, but her mom has graced us with her presence today. Yes. 98, looking for 100, still going strong, still praising God. Amen. Yeah, I see a bunch of new faces. Y'all are all welcome. We'll introduce you later if you'd like to, or we'll let you be anonymous. Either way. Okay, so Wes Wagner said to me, hey, while we're in the summertime doing short series, we don't have to do anything long in the summertime. Let's take a couple of weeks. Jim, you're famous for giving these big picture explanations. Would you take 2 weeks and give us the history of Israel? The first part will be from Abraham to Jesus, and then next week we'll go from Jesus to today. You say, why? What is so important about Israel? Well, it is the center of everything that God has ever done in terms of our salvation. All of God's words and deeds for our salvation flow out of this people group, more than the land, but the people group called Israel. They're called the chosen people. Now, that doesn't mean that they get automatically free salvation into heaven. Even the Jews know that. No. It means they're chosen, that God chose them to work through, to use them as an example, to bless them and punish them. And they have been blessed and punished alternatively since time immemorial. So part 1, we'll do that in part 2. Quick pre-test question though. What do the following 10 Old Testament people have in common? Some of you get these notes yesterday and you already pondered. Anybody know the answer? They're all descendants of Adam. You're close. The answer is none of them are Jews. Those are 10 of the people in the Old Testament, not one of them is a Jew. God did have a lot of other things to say and other people to work through. Adam and Eve, of course, were before Jew. Who was Cain and Abel? Cain and Abel, ring a bell? Brothers, and which one killed the other one? Cain killed Abel. And Seth was then born as the replacement for Abel. And then Methuselah, I mentioned him, or Enoch. Who was Enoch? What's said about Enoch? He walked, yeah, it said he walked with God. We hadn't heard that since Adam. He walked with God. He had a relationship with the living God. We don't know anything about what that was like. But he walked with God so close on a day, God said, why don't you just come on my house? We don't think he died, he just went. He prefigures an event that's called the rapture, which is still coming. There's several of these. Elijah is another one. He went up in a chariot, right? Jesus ascended. Yeah. So those guys are interesting. And then Methuselah lived a very long time, right? People did live a long time before the flood. Then Noah was not a Jew. Job wasn't a Jew. The love story of Ruth is amazing, and she was not a Jew either. So we get to, I listed this as 9 eras. I call them era because I think they're not really the covenants, because the covenant, if you do covenant division, it's a little different. They're not really the dispensations or systems, they're close. But era one of Israel was the patriarchs, the fathers. And we think that Abraham lived about 2200 BC. Boy, history gets really sketchy when you go back that far. For a long time, the skeptics said there wasn't anybody doing any writing in those days till they dug up a whole a language in a library of the Chaldeans. And then later at Ur, U-R, of the Chaldees, where little boy Abram was born and raised in Ur, they dug up a library with multiple languages, and had to go back and say, okay, they were smarter than we thought back then, right? So we turn to Genesis 12, 1-3. We're going to hear this verse here. Genesis 12, 1-3. Libby's going to give it to us.
Now the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make you your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed.
Say that last line again. Who?
And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed.
How do you spell all? What does all mean? Israel is big news. God said, I'm choosing this nation, descendants of this. Now, the Abrahamic religions would include the Jews. It also includes the Muslims, in a strange way, and it includes the Christians. All three of these religions have descended from Abraham. The people that founded those and were the leaders of those, all descended from Abraham. Buddhism did not, Hinduism did not. They're across the world somewhere. Now, if I said the Bible has two parts, what are the two parts? That's what most of us say. In seminary, they will say the first part is Genesis 1-11. And the second part is everything after Genesis 12 is focused on the nation and the descendants of Abraham. Whoa, Babylon's involved, Assyria's involved, but in a way that's kind of true. The first 11 chapters addresses the whole world, those guys that are not Jews. And from this chapter on, we're talking about the Jews. And Abram's name is Abram, but he makes a covenant with God, and many times when people made a covenant with God, he changed their name. And in this case, he changed Abram's name to, and he changed Sarai to Sarah. Now, in Hebrew, Hebrew is very poetic. And when you say Abram, and you change it to Abraham, you have to breathe out. And Sarai to Sarah, it's like God breathed the breath of life in them when he changed their name. It's the only time we see that. Now, it was said that God created Adam and breathed the breath of life into him. But the aspirative, as it's called in the Hebrew language, appears in the very names of Abraham and Sarah. And then they had kids, right? When they were old, they thought they couldn't have a kid, and Ishmael was born not to Sarah, but to Sarah's handmaiden named Hagar. Okay? And then Isaac is born. Let's hear the birth of Isaac. This is the blessing of Isaac, I think. Genesis 18.
Where is Sarah, your wife? The visitors asked. She is inside the tent, Abraham replied. Then one of them said, I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Sarah was listening to this conversation from the tent. Abraham and Sarah were both very old by this time, and Sarah was long past the age of having children. So she laughed silently to herself and said, how could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is also so old? Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, can an old woman like me have a baby? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son.
So she laughed. So then she has a son the next year and named him Isaac, which means laughter. His name was Laughter. So this is the miraculous birth, one of the many. Does it prefigure another miraculous birth? The Virgin Mary, right?
Yeah.
Old and young. And the point of this verse is anything too difficult for God? And the answer would be, apparently not. Okay. But let's turn the page, go backwards here to Genesis 16 and listen to the blessing upon Ishmael. This is the son that, when they didn't trust God to do it, they manipulated the process and tried to solve it themselves. We all can say, I've been there, done that, where I took matters in my own hand and solved some problem that I didn't have patience to let God solve it. And here's a classic example of what's going to happen. Ishmael, looking for number 3. Oh, who's got number 3? Card number 3? Card number 3, Genesis 16:11. Just read it, Joni. You're a good reader.
I got 27. Oh, okay.
I got it.
Wait,
Oh,
wait
there.
a second. It's over
The
here.
angel of the Lord said to her further, Behold, you are with child, and you will bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has given heed to your affliction.
Yeah, keep reading. One more for
He
fun.
will be a wild donkey of land. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, and he will live to the east of all his brothers.
Now, this is a very vague, typical prophecy. He's going to be a wild donkey. His name means affliction. And he is going to be against his brothers. He is going to be against the descendants of Abraham. And he will live to the east of them. The people we call Muslims, who are not our enemies, they're just people that are called Muslims, they're a different religion, live to the east of the Jews primarily, correct? And they've been fighting ever since. Yes, ma'am?
Muslims believe that he was a legitimate son. But
Yes. So that, yeah, in fact, in the Islam is a word that means, it does not mean peace, if anybody ever tells you that. No, it doesn't. It means submission, it means to bow the knee. The word peace is salam, almost like the Hebrew word shalom. There's a city, the capital of Tanzania is Dar es Salaam, the house of peace. Dar es Salaam is a phrase in Arabic that means the Muslim world. We're the house of peace. We don't fight each other. You say, wait, they fight each other all the time. They do. Dar al-Harb means house of war. That's the rest of the world. They're at war with the rest of the world. They believe their great commission is go out and conquer everybody. And turn them, yeah, our great commission is go out and love everybody and share the good news with them and don't compel them to become Christians, but we share the good news. We show up in deed, by acts of kindness, by word, by teaching. That's our missions commission. Theirs is they conquer. And so the prophecy, you are living witnesses of that prophecy. To this day, the Muslims are still fighting Israel. All the countries, the Houthi, the Gaza, Hamas, Hezbollah, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran. There's 26 countries in the world that are dominated by Muslim by populations. And they're pretty much at different levels. Uganda has a minority population of Muslims, by the way, so they're well behaved. If they were ever the majority, they would not be well behaved. But we got to love the Muslims. My friend Tony Weeder used to say, he taught about this, said ISLAM spells I shall love all Muslims. That's right. I'm still working on it, Judy. I don't like the terrorists, but I'm working on the curriculum. In fact, 99.9% of all the Muslims in the world would be your friend. 0.1% of 2 billion is a big number. It's 20 million. 20 million would not be your friend. That's 4 times the size of our military. Yeah. So, yeah, you meet Muslims here, they'd love you. Talk to them. Say hello. Yeah, ladies say hello to ladies, men say hello to men. They'll be shocked that you're friendly to them. Yeah, I hit them with my one sentence in Arabic. Assalamu alaikum means peace to you. And they go, oh, alaikum salam, peace back to you. And they're just like, yeah, it's fine. Then I tell them about the Gideon Bible app that has the Gideon Bible on there. You have the Christian Bible on your phone. It's an app called the Gideon Bible app. It's free and it has it in Arabic and in all the other languages of the world. Okay, don't chase that rabbit, Jim. Where's Carla? I need my Ritalin. Where's Carla? I'm going off the meds. Okay, we're still in era 1. That's okay. Okay, we're going to do one more, the patriarchs. This will pick up speed in a minute because it'll become more familiar. But we're laying that groundwork. Now, Isaac has a son. He has twins, Jacob and Esau. Let's hear about Jacob, Genesis 27, 22 to 29. Now we're back to Jacob. This is Jacob.
Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he proceeded to bless him. "Are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "I am," he replied. And then he said, "My son, bring me some of your game to eat so that I may give you my blessing." Jacob brought it to him, and he ate. And he brought some wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, and abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed."
This is Jacob, who steals the birthright of his brother by disguising himself as an outdoorsman. Jacob was an indoor guy. Esau was the hunter. They were twins. Esau was born first. Jacob's very name, which was attached to him later, I think, means the supplanter, the deceiver, or the lack of truth. So we associate the name Jacob. James comes from that name, and we associate the name James with either truth or the lack of truth. Okay, hopefully truth. But are you telling me, John, that God allowed this guy to take the place of his brother, and he got the blessing of his father? Kaboom, right? Esau comes running in and says, my father, what's happened? You gave the blessing to him. He stole my blessing. Why didn't they just say King's X? Forget that, do it over again. Because words have power. When the father puts his hand on the son and blesses him, it is what we call in Texas a done deal. You can't take it back. And Esau knows it. So listen to this verse about Esau, Genesis 36:9. 36:9 anywhere? It's a very short verse. If you have card number 4. If not, I'll read it. Going. Here we go. 36:9, just one verse. This is the account of Esau, the father of the Edomites in the hill country of Seir. Esau ends up living among the descendants of Ishmael. So the Edomites are a subset of the Muslims, also what we would call Arab peoples, because of the Saudi Arabian peninsula, in the language of Arabic, ancient language. So you see again, the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But now we're going to go from one son to 12. And Jacob, in Genesis 32:24-28, has a wrestling match. It's an Olympic wrestling match. Let's read that one. There you go. Who's got the card number? Genesis 32. Yeah.
So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And the man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God, with humans, and have overcome."
Amazing. He changed his name. This is a covenant again. This man was an angel, by the way. An angel wrestled with Jacob and changed his name to, if you pronounce it Israel, you hear the L at the end. L means God. Israel means wrestles with God, struggles with God. Oh, the Jews have been struggling with God ever since. Oh, yeah. Another prophecy come to pass before our eyes. And so Jacob has 12 kids. And these are the 12 tribes of Israel. And it's kind of amazing here. He first is wanting to marry Rachel, but he's given Leah as a wife. And Leah bears him Reuben, Levi, Simon, and Judah, and Zebulun. And then by Bilhah, who is a handmaid or concubine, there's Dan and Naphtali. They count equally as tribes. We would say they're illegitimate children. Not in that system. Nope, they're sons of Jacob, they're in. Then by Zilpah, another handmaid, Gad and Asher. Finally, by Rachel is born Joseph and Benjamin. If you do the count, that's only 11 tribes. But then Jacob adopts 2 sons of Joseph, his father, after Joseph died. They will basically be his, what are they, sons of his father? That's because they were brothers, you're right. They were his biological brothers, or half-brothers. He adopts them, and they become the 2 half-tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. So when you're reading about those two guys that'll always say the half tribe of Manasseh, the half tribe of Egypt, because they got squeezed in there. The genealogy of the tribes are mostly lost, by the way, in 71 AD. We'll get there next week. The Jews are scattered around the world. So most Jews today don't know their tribal identities. If your last name happens to be Levi or Levitt, that's a pretty big clue right there, okay? And there was one tribe named Zebulon, and there's a famous Colorado hero whose name was Zebulon.
Pike.
You all know it? Pike. You do know Zebulon Pike. He's the only guy I've ever heard of that was named for the tribal leader of Israel. And Pike did not climb Pike's Peak, you know that. Long didn't climb Long's Peak, but Long's climbed Pike's Peak. There he goes. Okay. There he goes. Okay. How does this era end? Okay. In Genesis 50, and I forgot to give a call. If you're flip over to 50. Tell me what's the first verse of Genesis? What does it say? In the beginning. Oh, it's glorious. God creates the heavens and the earth. And what happens is the Garden of Eden, right? And then we get down to the end, and the last verse says, Joseph died at the age of 110. After they embalmed him, he was placed in a pine box in Egypt. So Genesis starts out in the Garden of Eden and creation of the heavens and the earth and ends up in a coffin. Genesis is basically a downer book, isn't it? The paradox is that while the world is fallen and broken and sinking into sin, and we have the flood of Noah, God says, I've had it with all of you. Then we have the Babel experience where God says, I'm going to scatter you guys out because you did not follow in what I told you to do. In spite of all that, this nation is born in the middle of that. And it's quirky things are happening in this nation. You got Abram and Sarah and Ishmael, and then you got Jacob and Isaac. I mean, it's almost like, I don't want to say dirty, but it's so imperfection is everywhere, isn't it? And yet the nation is born, and now finally the last of the patriarchs, Joseph, dies. He's the last of the 12 tribes, but he's the guy that was the big guy at the end. So Genesis is kind of a downer book, isn't it? But now we get to era 3, and we're in the nation of Egypt, it's called. We're in Egypt, and the Exodus. Now, what? Yes, sir.
I read here it says that Moses had Joseph to remain carried from Egypt during the Exodus, and I had never heard that before.
Yeah, they dug him up and took him with them. They buried him. When they fled into Egypt, they took Joseph with them. Yeah. So the Exodus, what does the word Exodus mean?
Leaving.
Look up that green sign right back there. That's it. That English word it means the way out. It's always a handy thing to know where the green sign is. When the fire alarm goes off, go that way. So we had 400 years of suffering in Egypt, but it ended with the prayer of Moses. And when God heard his prayer, he said, I have heard the prayers of the people, and I've let them suffer enough. And so Moses leads them out of Egypt, right? That's another chapter of thing. And I put for you to see, this is actually D.L. Moody's famous quote. Moses spent 40 years thinking he was somebody as a prince of Egypt. Then he murdered a guy and had to flee to the wilderness. He spent 40 years finding out he was a nobody. Then he spent 40 years finding out what God could do with a nobody. It's really true, isn't it? And how does that era end? Exodus. So the Bible books that are in this era, I put the blanks there. Exodus means what? The way out. What does Leviticus mean? Levites and priests, or what is the book about? What is that book about? Leviticus, it's a Latin word, not even a Hebrew word. Well, no, Leviticus means it's about Levites and priests. It is the Latin noun for the name Levite, but it's Levites and priests. And then what's the book of Numbers about? Offering and feasts. Offerings and feasts. So it kind of rhymes. Leviticus is Levites and priests. Numbers is offering and feast. If you are having trouble sleeping at night, these two books will help you greatly. They will knock you out, yes. And then what does Deuteronomy mean? What's a deuce in dominoes? Okay, it's law, and nomos is law. So Deuteronomy basically means law the second time. And what it is, it's the Reader's Digest condensed version of the first 4 books of the Bible. It actually is Moses' farewell speech, except his death is recorded and someone else wrote the last chapter for him after he died. I don't think he wrote it after he died. I have a card. Somebody has Deuteronomy 6, 5, and 6. Here is the verse that will just sum up everything you need to know about application. Where is it? Our man Steve, be the voice of God here.
Here we go.
Here's the voice of Moses.
That's it? Listen up, O Israel. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your hearts and with all your soul and with all your strength. Because if you don't, things aren't going to go that well for you. Italics are mine.
That's right. I mean, are you shocked now? All the laws, all the priests, all the sacrifices, all the offerings, all the rules boil down to this. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And Jesus quotes this when they ask him in Matthew 22. Oh, there's too many commandments. Guys, there are too many commandments in the book. I can't handle them all. Can you just give me one? What's the big one? He gave him this one, then he added, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, it's a lot more fun than all those feasts and offerings and stuff, isn't it? We're reading Deuteronomy 6, 5, and 6. Yeah, it's not on the handout. I left it off, sorry. On the far right there, but Deuteronomy, it is the great Shema, the great, listen up. Yeah, Shema Ya Israel Adonai Elohim Adonai Echad. It's the one sentence I can quote from the Old Testament from 40 years ago in seminary. Listen up, Israel. The Lord, Yahweh, is God. Yahweh is one. And yeah, God is one. Not. This is the Trinity in there. Yeah, you're seeing this. One God, not many, many gods. Okay, now we're going to dash forward. Era 4 is the conquest of the land. And we're going to study Joshua in real detail. But you got to get this one verse. Joshua 1, 1-3. Moses dies, and wrong leader takes his place.
After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people, get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses.
So Genesis was a downer book. Exodus was kind of an up book. It gets better. They get out, but they don't get to the promised land. And you have the teachings of Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. And now we got a real upper book, right? Joshua. Every foot you're set on, I'm giving it to you. They argue over who owns the Middle East, you know. And you heard them chant from the river to the sea. Do y'all know which river they're talking about? Jordan. Which sea are they talking about? Not the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea. What they're saying is all the land that the United Nations created in Israel, which we'll study next week, we want it all back. It's right there in Joshua. It's right there in Exodus. It's in about 20 different places. God said, this is your land, okay? And so they got the claim. And then Joshua 1, 7-8. Let's hear that one too, because it's kind of cool.
Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the left or to the right, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful.
Now, be strong is for us too. Let the world shake and rock and roll. God's still on the throne. Be strong. Be courageous. Help others be courageous by encouraging them. Encouraging means to put courage into, right? And what's the easiest formula for success? Let God be God and do it God's way. I think Steve said that. Otherwise, it doesn't work out very well, does it? You want a book on success? Here it is. Right here. Yeah, fantastic stuff. And Joshua, is Joshua fully successful or only partially successful? Everybody says partially because he was actually supposed to either kill or drive out everybody in the land. Because God was basically saying, if you don't do that, they're going to intermarry a lot. There are going to be problems. And he didn't have the stomach to do it. I understand. Too much bloodshed. One of those paradoxical things, the God of love and mercy at some points gets to a place where he says, I can't take any more of the people that are in the land. The Hivites, the Hittites, the Philistines, all those tribes. He says, they got to go. One way to either drive them out or kill them. But Joshua couldn't do it all. And so there's a lot of problems to that. Now, after the book of Joshua comes the book of Judges. And the book of Judges is a bunch of cycles through different leaders who are not judges. Deborah's in this book, Gideon's in this book, Samson. And the key verse of Judges is 17:6. Let's listen to this and see if it sounds like the land we live under that. Judges. Wes is going to judge us.
In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes.
Everybody did what was right in their own eyes. Truth became relative.
I've read that one of the reasons why God directed them to completely destroy the Canaanites, because they have found, I guess, some archaeology studies that venereal diseases were running rampant among the Canaanites, and that's why God said to destroy them completely.
I don't doubt it. Sin leads to, somebody said, sin will take you further than you want to go, will keep you longer than you want to stay, and cost you more than you want to pay. And a nation that just becomes wantonly sinful ends up in a self-destruction cycle. I hope that doesn't sound too familiar to us right now. The jury is still out. We still have a remnant here, right? We have a very large segment of righteous people in this country. We're still the ones that are bringing in the African Children's Choir and raising money to send out to Africa. May our tribe increase. In fact, I was talking to one of the leaders, oh, this is a great church you got. And I said, yeah, and I wish I could tell you that every church in the state of Colorado was like this. But we're an exception to the rule. With a full building and a full parking lot and 2 services and offerings ahead of budget, we're figuring out ways to impact the world. Most of the churches out there are figuring out ways to stay in business right now, post-COVID, still trying to recover. Yeah, we need a spiritual awakening. We're praying for it, right? Okay, we switched it. This thing goes back and forth. We're just marching along to the conquest of land, and it was in this period of time that we have Ruth, this wonderful love. We got to hear the 2 verses from Ruth. Who's got Ruth 1:15-17?
As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men. Even if she gathers among the sheaves, don't embarrass her. Rather, pull out some stalks from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up.
I may have given you the wrong verses. I was looking for the one that said Ruth 1.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, the other Ruth 1. That was a cool verse.
Man, my version's really different.
Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. And your people will be my people and your God, my God.
That's fantastic.
Where you die, I will die. And there I will be there. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you from me.
What occasion do you normally hear this verse read out loud? In a wedding. Yet it's a woman making a pledge to her mother-in-law. But it's making a covenant saying, I'm with you, I'm going to go where you go. This is good for all of us. Say, Lord, I'm with you. I'm your people. You're going to be my God. I'm going where you want me to go. Yeah. And there's one more. Ruth 2:12 is a short verse, but it's kind of the key verse of this.
Gotta find my spot. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge.
Get under the God of Israel's wings. We're still talking the history of Israel. She came into Israel, she gets blessed. Those who bless Jerusalem get blessed. Those who don't bless Jerusalem don't get blessed. Amen? That's what it means here to Joseph. Don't fight that. Okay, flip the page. We're going to pick up some speed here because we haven't got any more readers, for one thing. I'm going to try to dash through this last part. What you're seeing next is the United Kingdom of Israel under 3 kings. In the book of 1 Samuel, the days of which king? Who was the first king of the 3? Saul. S-A-U-L. You can remember 1 Samuel is about Saul because Saul is the first king anointed by Samuel. Then we get to the 2nd king. His name is, he's the 2nd king anointed by Samuel. That's how I remember that. So his book is in 2 Samuel. So if you're looking for the story of David and Goliath, David wasn't king, he was a boy. Who was king? Saul. So where's the story of David and Goliath going to be found? 1 Samuel. You can flip around the pages, it's about the 9th chapter. Then we get to the 3rd king, and that is the days of Solomon and a bunch of kings behind him. And Solomon was the first king not anointed by Samuel. The other way you can remember these three kings is Saul had no heart for God. You cannot find one verse where Saul praised God, worshiped God, loved God, was wowed by God, thanked God. God just was one of those guys that didn't have any heart for God. David comes along, in spite of his faults, is said a man after God's own heart. Wow. And he writes the middle book of the Bible, the book of Psalms, which are songs of praise to God. He's the author of most of the Psalms. I didn't have time to mention, Moses actually wrote Psalm 90. If you want to hear from Moses, read Psalm 90. It's where it says, number your days, that you'll have a heart of wisdom. Yeah, Moses was a pretty smart guy. All right, so he had a whole heart. Then Solomon comes along, and he had a half heart for God. Anybody want to guess what the other half of his heart and passion and energy went to? Women. He had too many wives and girlfriends. It was his downfall. You see the line where it says the peak of the rise of Israel was his sin? Scratch that out and put it in the wrong place. That line belongs under David. The rise and fall of Israel we're studying here. Big picture all in one shot. Israel starts out with Abraham and Jacob and Isaac and Moses and Egypt, and we finally get to the land. Joshua gets the land, and we survive the judges. We get to these kings, and David is the king, and I mean, we are rocking it. And he commits one sin that was just too much. What was it? Bathsheba. He murders Bathsheba's husband and takes her as his wife. And Solomon was born to who? Bathsheba. God is weird, I'm telling you. You couldn't make this stuff up. Hollywood wouldn't write it this way. It's the broken and fallen world. Broken and fallen people again and again, and God makes good come out of it. And in Romans we read, God causes all things to work together so that good comes out of it. To those who are called according to his purpose. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? God lets all these bad things happen. So today, the most common question pastors are asking is, why are so many bad things happening to people? If there was a God, why didn't he straighten it out? Well, that's not his agenda. He doesn't want this to be heaven on earth. He wants us to be looking forward to heaven with him. And the earth is broken and fallen. And the weather forecast right now, for me, would be it's going to get worse before it gets better, okay? And it's going to get shakier and crazier and more wars and more stuff. That's okay. God's still on the throne. And good will come out of all this. It's hard to see sometimes. It's very hard to see, but it's there. Okay, those are the three kings. Solomon, the book of the First and Second Kings, by the way, is a book that emphasizes. This is under First and Second Chronicles, while First and Second Kings emphasizes the political history. That's what I want you to see. First and Second Kings reads like Fox News and CNN News, whichever news. If you want to watch them both, you'll think we live in two different countries. It's really funny. I watch BBC News, sometimes Australian news. I get Joel Rosenberg stuff, all Israel news. Chronicles emphasizes the religious histories of the books. Oh, we do have, it's all quotes, 2 Chronicles 7:14. You can quote it with me. If my people who are called by my name will do four things, humble themselves, pray, seek my face, I will hear from heaven and heal their land. Notice he did not seek my hand. To seek the hand of God is, help me, God, I need money to pay the rent. But seek my face, seek my presence, worship me. Say to me, wow, God, you're wow. That's seeking his face. Okay, and then 2 Chronicles 16:9, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro across the earth, seeking whose heart is his that he might bless him. God wants to bless your life this week. Yeah. Maybe go home and say, Lord, I'm ready for the blessing. I want you to show up and bless me. Bring the blessing this week, and I will give you the credit, and I'll honor you when it comes. If you're ready, it'll come. Okay, so what happens next? Now, all the Psalms and Proverbs are written during this time. Now we get to era 6. This is the divided kingdom and its demise. We start down the fall. Solomon has a son and a nephew named Jeroboam and Rehoboam, and they are greedy politicians. They make 105 blush. I mean, they are really, really bad. The southern kingdom becomes known as Judah, and the northern kingdom becomes known as Israel. So you have the king of Judah and the king of Israel fighting, and all this is all through the books of Kings and Chronicles. They fight each other. And the northern kingdom the capital was a city called Samaria. It's still there to this day. Today it's the middle province, like the middle county of Israel. Judah, or Jerusalem is in the county of Judah. Then you have Samaria, then you have Galilee at the north. What's funny about Samaritans is the people there were called Samaritans, but they intermarried when they got carried off to Assyria. The northern kingdom was carried off in 722, and people moved back after generations that were half Assyrian, half Jew. They were called Samaritans. And nobody liked them. And Jesus told that parable about the good. Yeah. That parable works like this. He was in Greeley, Colorado, and a man was walking on a walking path down there on 35th Street, and some people came out of the bushes and mugged him. And the Wesleyan pastor came by, but he didn't stop and help him because he had to get to a meeting someplace. And then the Catholic priest came by, he didn't stop and help him because he didn't want to get his robes dirty. And then a Middle Eastern Iranian refugee who works in a convenience store came by, a Samaritan. Yeah, this is what Jesus told, which is why the people that listened to it were just stunned that the hero was the least liked person, the Samaritan. Yeah, I could do a whole sermon on that. That's how that whole parable is mind-boggling. Anyway, quick dates: 722 BC. We now know the exact year. 10 of the tribes were lost. The southern kingdom didn't really get carried off into Babylon. Some people did. The youth, Daniel and his buddies were probably among the youth that got carried off. But they just came into Jerusalem and they destroyed the temple. They destroyed the temple that's on the handout. They knocked down Solomon's temple, okay? But the Assyrian army eventually gave way to the Babylonian armies prior to this time. So Babylon is now the empire. This is out of not far from the city of Baghdad. And the city of Babylon has been dug up. It was prophesied it would never be, nobody would ever live there again. And so far, that prophecy is held up. But what happens is in the era of captivity, we have, era 7, we have Israel basically in captivity, either in their own land or these other lands. And the Bible books of Daniel and Esther are there. But the Babylonians lost out to the Medes and Persians. I don't have this on the handout. That's the hand that appeared upon the wall and said, your kingdom has been found, weighed in the balance and found wanting, and you are history. That was the end of Babylon. And the Medes and the Persians took over. And Cyrus the Mede was a friendly king, and he enters, now we're in era 8. He allows the Jews to go back and rebuild their city, and this is called the Restoration period. A guy named Zerubbabel, whose name I remember because he built on the rubble. That's how my brain works. He was a Babylonian Jew, but he was in the line of David. So he comes back and basically is the mayor of Jerusalem. Ezra comes back as a book of Ezra, and Ezra stood up on a platform and read the law to the people. He made the law easy, like Ezra, his name. Ezra made the law easy to understand. Yeah, it's in the book of Nehemiah. It's about 8th chapter of Nehemiah. He stood up every day on a high platform, and from dawn until noon, he read from all the books that we've just been talking about. And the people hadn't read these books in a very long time. And they went, oh my gosh, we have done everything wrong. We've abandoned our Creator and our Redeemer. And guess what? They get to come back. And then Nehemiah comes. And he's famous for what? He built the knee-high wall. Nehemiah wall. Okay. Now, at the end of the story, we're going to make it in 5 minutes, is the 9th era, because I kind of want you to see the whole picture. Now you've seen the rise, and you've seen the fall and captivity. There's a restoration period. By the way, they built Zerubbabel also built the temple back. He built the temple that was standing when Jesus was there. And then we'll get there, but the Romans paragraph again, that's why it's not there today. So the 9th era, you have rising empires. Now Greece was a collection of little bitty states like Athens and Sparta, and they always fought each other until Philip. Philip was the big guy. He was from Macedonia is named for him. Philippi, all the towns called Philippi are named for this guy. And he united them into a nation and passed the throne to his son, whose name was Alexander. And Alexander took that big army and conquered everybody within walking and riding distance. And at age 32, got some kind of disease that no one knows what it was and fell over dead, leaving a wife and a son. One of his rival and subordinate generals tried to seize power and clashed with the wife, so he had the wife and the son executed right after Alexander was suddenly wiped out. And the kingdom falls into 4 parts. There's the Ptolemies, as they're called in Egypt, the Seleucids, were over there where Israel is. The Pergamum regime was in Turkey, and then the Macedonians back in the home state were there. It was during this time, if you've ever heard of the Maccabean Revolution, that was Judas Maccabeus, the Jew, tried to chase the Greeks' armies out of the Holy Land. He wasn't totally successful, but he did push them back and minimize their stuff. But Greece is falling apart during the four leaders, and Rome is rising, okay? And Rome coexisted with Greece for some time, and they eventually conquered these four guys. But you're going to recognize some of these names. Julius Caesar was one of the leaders, and he is stabbed by Brutus and Cassius. Remember that? That's Shakespeare going to play out of that. That's really happened. And then Octavian, who's a nephew, a great nephew of Julius, and a guy named Mark Antony, they commit revenge on Brutus and Cassius. And now they're the two guys in charge. Mark Antony is down in the south. He's in love with the last of the Ptolemies, a woman, queen named Cleopatra. And Octavian has the navy. He goes down and defeats Mark Antony. Winners always fight each other, don't they? And he knocks off Mark Antony, and Octavian is now the last man standing. And he changes his name. He says, I am Caesar the first and greatest. And the first and greatest is the word Augustus. And our month August comes from that Latin word. I am Caesar Augustus. 27 years before, 27 BC, he ruled all the way to 1480, 40 years. He is the Caesar that is born, that is ruling when Jesus is born. And we're not sure what year Jesus was born. I don't think Jesus wants us to know all of that stuff. We can't find the exact house he was born in. We can't find the jug of wine. We'd go nuts if we found some of that stuff. But none of the cross. You go to Israel, they'll sell you a piece of the cross, right? $20 a piece. Yeah, you just gotta take that stuff. It's just, they learned it from the Americans, don't worry. But the point is, so Israel, Old Testament version, has this incredible history that makes your head want to spin of disobedience, restoration, brokenness, recovery, captivity, restoration. And so you see the history of the world here, don't you? We're still there. We're still up and down. The world is broken and fallen, and God is yet still on the throne redeeming. It's this giant paradox. But you think you've seen wild and crazy things. Wait till next week. Okay? The next 2,000 years are wilder and crazier. Well, Eric must have had a short-term memory of that, but Eric wanted to say thank you to you guys for your support, and we'll get him in here next week maybe. Youth camp, he said, was beyond expectation. We took a bunch of kids over there, 80 kids over there, he had all kinds of, the camp is called, NTS, Never the Same. Come here, you won't be the same after this. And so, they drive all the way to Dordt University in where? Thank you. Is it, what kind of a school is Dordt? It sounds, Dordt. Not Dordt, but Dordt. It is reformed, okay. But their campus is where they hold this NTS campus out, yes.
The unique thing about this is the group that hosts this camp, they do everything. So the youth pastors don't have to be flying, they can stay with their group or be with them, which is totally unusual the way youth camps are done.
And in closing, if you were spiritually aware and awake today, you saw a miracle right in our auditorium. Tim Troxel preached for only 15 minutes. I didn't think he could do that. In the end, he had 3 points. What were the 3 points? Drink, help, give, and celebrate often. I'm telling you, if you preach shorter sermons, people remember more. Said the man who just taught for 50 minutes.
I said it'd be more of a miracle if you could.
Yeah. It would be more of a miracle if I could do it. Right. Okay.
It's interesting, one of the theology professors years ago in our college told his students, not many souls are saved after 20 minutes.
Well, it is true. In our setting here, we seem to get away with this in the roundtable setting and a lot of interaction. But just listening to a lecture, like in the big room, yeah, I would like to preach 30 minutes or less. I get another chance September the 1st, so. Yes, ma'am.
I have a pastor that's a really good friend of mine. He said after 8 minutes, forget it. He said, you better be having really good
is
points,
frightening.
because he said 8 minutes that people are gone.
So basically, every 7 to 8 minutes, you gotta get them back. Now, if you change the slides on the screen, there's an amazing effect every item.
Yeah, but this is the day before slide.
It's still true.
We're
It's still true.
old, we're
It's still
old.
true. Hey, by the way, we forgot to mention, Alexander the Great had a wife. Do you know what his wife's name was? Roxanne. Name for the wife of Alexander the Great. How cool is that?
It's called my mother just likes her name, that's all.
Okay. Join me in a spirit of prayer. Well, Father God, we've been having a good time. We're celebrating in the house of the Lord. We love to be together in fellowship. Look at your word, see your history, see your hand at work. Father, bless the children's choir. Bless the whole ministry, the school they're trying to build. They own 8 schools, they're building a big building. And we speak your blessing over them that between now and November, everywhere they go, they have safe travels, they have warm receptions, and they raise funds. America can do it, Father. We've still got a remnant here, and we can sponsor kids and we can build a building. Amen. Amen. Okay, that's lunch. Welcome all the new people. It's not always as crazy. Tomorrow.